Welcome to My Life After, the podcast where we explore stories of resilience, transformation, and reinvention. I'm your host, Steve Joseph, and my guest today is Paula, a U.S. Army veteran who served in Iraq during Desert Storm 2. Her journey didn't end when she came home. Like so many veterans, Paula faced the hidden scars of war, struggling with severe PTSD, addiction, and a lack of support when she needed it most. Paula found healing in an unconventional and controversial way: psychedelics. She not only overcame her trauma, but connected with her roots and discovered filmmaking. In today's episode, Paula shares her deeply personal story of survival and the struggles of reintegration and the creative journey that's helping her and others heal. So, shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
So, Paula, how would you describe to people the chapters in your life that have brought you to the chapter in your life that you are writing now?
I was born and raised in Cali, Colombia, in South America. And I moved to the U.S. when I was 16. So I come from an immigrant family. My father immigrated when I was 2 years old. So he had a very specific way for us to be in the United States, like the American dream. So I wanted to be an artist. He didn't want me to. So I joined the United States Army right after high school. And that actually, it's what gives me the foundation to do what I do now. Because I always wonder why I was a soldier first. But as I'm a filmmaker now, I understand, because I made it to sergeant in the Army and I saw leadership, good and bad. So that actually trained me to be a director, to someone that leads, that is through leadership. So by joining in the service and being around all these people in different environments and being thrown into a new area, very young, 19 years old, 18. I joined when I was 18, 19. And I was very young. So I was thrown in specific areas and I had to become resilient and to learn all these new skills to get through life. So I think my time in the service truly helped me be a filmmaker. I think it gave me the right foundation. Yeah.
And so your journey was Colombia, growing up there, coming to the United States in your teens, joining the military service, and then after the military, and we'll get into that in more detail, but after the military, your new life is as a filmmaker now. And that's something that you're pursuing as a career now.
Correct. But the Army trained me as an LPN, licensed practical nurse. So I was a nurse, right? And when I got out of the service, because I didn't truly came into the arts until after I got out of the military. I was 4.5 years active duty. And then I landed in New York City with my family and then I became a nurse, right? I worked a little bit as a nurse and then I found acting. And then I went to school for acting. And then after acting, I always wanted to tell stories. I always wanted to write. Since I was 16 years old, I would write poetry. And that, a little bit here, there, and I started writing, and then I became a filmmaker, yeah.
I keep thinking of the word theater because they call it the theater of war. They call an operating room the theater. And now you're operating in a different theater, which is film, right? So I find that really, really interesting. We connected on the topic of your time in the service and the impact it had on you and the impact that it had post exiting your time in the service. Let's talk about your tour in Iraq. When were you in Iraq? That was, I think that was the first time you saw war, were part of war. Can you describe to us how somebody who, grew up in Colombia, United States, now all of a sudden is deployed into this combat zone, and what was your role in it? What did you see? What was it like the first, say, 3 months for you?
I always say that the training, actually, everything started with my training, I think. I was trained in Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, in Brooke Army Medical Center, which is one of the best burn centers in the United States. And that was my first taste of war. I saw my first death, the first family members crying and begging for their family members' lives as they were dying. And I think that was my first experience. And then after nursing school, I went to Fort Carson, and then we deployed. I deployed with the 10th Combat Support Hospital, and for 12 months in 2008, 2009. So I was in the international zone, which is a pretty like safe zone where, you have all these coalition forces. And I was mostly in the ICU. I spent a lot of time in the ICU. I did a little bit of a clinic as well. I had a job in a clinic once, and I did like 1 or 2 shifts in the ER that, I mean, it was very traumatic. I mean, the ER and the ICU, and there were times where the OR will come into the ICU to try to save the soldiers' lives. And we had to deal with soldiers, coalition forces, local nationals, and insurgents as well. So even guys that were blindfolded, that they couldn't see who we were, right? And a lot of children. And it was very traumatic, It's just like what war does to everyone.
Are you in a city? Are you able to go in and out very freely? And you mentioned you were even operating on children. So that meant that you were also working with the local people, not just other soldiers. Is that correct?
I wasn't operating myself, but we had a lot of local nationals, and a lot of them were children. There were so many children who were burned, like so many. I mean, a lot of pediatric patients. And so we worked also with local nationals. And my unit went to Ibn Sina Hospital, which was a hospital that was built by these 4 doctors for the people of Iraq, right? And he gave it to the people, and then Saddam came in and took it away from the people. He only used it for his people, but we came in and took it from him. And at the end, we gave the hospital back to the people of Iraq. Yeah.
What was the journey like being there for the initial deployment? You were there for how many years? 2 years?
No, 12 months, 1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of that 1 year, what did you see during that time that really took you from, where you were before you came in to now seeing the atrocities of war, seeing your colleagues, your brothers and sisters go through what they went through, and being in, even though you weren't frontline combat, you are seeing the aftermath of frontline combat, right? And you're seeing people now having their lives changed if they still have their lives. I mean, what toll did that take on you?
Oh, wow. It's a big one. Because, so when you go to war, they teach you how to disassociate yourself from the patients. But we're human beings, right? So it's only so much that you can do. You will be affected by this. And, from even my training, my training was pretty insane, actually. Very traumatizing, very, very traumatizing as well. And to seeing people without legs, arms, I remember, a captain rolling in his Humvee to try to save his soldier's life, and his face and everything that was happening. And that like really unconsciously, I think it was in my subconscious. I pressed it down, and I was just living through my life, right, to try to save somebody's life. And I called it the miracle hospital, because we saved a lot of people. And in a normal situation, I don't think that we have survived, but we had amazing nurses, doctors. I worked with like probably one of the best surgeons. His name is Dr. Danks. He was, a burn surgeon that saved so many lives. I loved working with him and learning from him. And he's still in the service, actually. So when I got out, I didn't know what was happening. Like, I wasn't aware enough and had enough consciousness to understand that I was living through life angry, mad, numbing myself with substances and all these things. And in reality, I was in so much pain. And what it first dawned on me when I was watching a TV show with my aunt, and all of a sudden the patient started coding, and I had a panic attack. I got a panic attack out of nowhere. I couldn't breathe. It was, I mean, everything closed in me, and it reminded me of some of
When
the
you
things.
say, sorry, when you say coding, what do you mean?
Oh, coding, somebody's dying.
Okay.
So you have
Okay.
to do chest compressions, you have to shock them, epinephrine, all those
Hmm.
things. So when
Hmm.
somebody's coding, it's like when their heart stops beating or they can't breathe, all these things happen. Yeah, they're dying. That's what it means. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so that was in that 1 year. You mentioned also, using substances and having anger. Like, who was that anger towards? What was that anger about?
I don't know. I think I didn't like certain races when I got out of the service because
Mm.
I went 0809 to war, and then I got out of the military in March of 2010. So shortly after I got back from Iraq, I got back in December of '09, and I left the military in 3 months later. So when you're at war, you're not very nice to the other races, and I had a lot of hatred that I was taught. I was taught that I'm from Colombia. What do I know about? I wasn't exposed to those things, but when I was in, I saw certain things, and people treated the local nationals very poorly, and and I kind of took part of it as well. I, you're so broken. You think when people go to war, they think, especially in the United States, you think you're the best, and the United States is the best. And yes, I get it, but we're also in somebody else's country, and I'm never gonna forget how some Iraqis were treated, and I took part of it as well. So I think, it's something that something that I have to heal, that I have to deal with, right? And yeah, and I think it was my aunt. She pointed it to me. She was like, "You're very hatred to these people. Certain people, they looked a certain way." I didn't know that, but I had it in me. So all that trauma that comes with being a war, with being in a place for 12 months, not being with your family, being pressure, people, a couple of murders coming in, and you're scared, and I don't want to be there. I mean, the majority of us don't want to go to war. Like, if people truly understand and will know what war is, how you have to dehumanize the other person in order for you to do your job. But we're all the same. We're all created the same. So yeah. But it wasn't until later on in life that I learned that. So I was very angry, and angry at myself. I didn't like myself. I didn't like other people. I was just ready to fight all the time. I had a friend of mine that always said to me, "Put your hands down, Paula. Put your hands down."
It's one of these things that if you are in a combat situation, you're a soldier deployed in war, and even uh, in your capacity as a nurse, it's a survival mechanism to use hate in order to fuel your purpose, in order to fuel your what it is your mission is there, right? And now when we look back at Desert Storm 2, the whole thing was under false pretenses, right? The whole thing was, hey, there's weapons of mass destruction and we need to go there. And everybody sat in front of the UN and told them, from George W. Bush to Colin Powell to Rumsfeld, all of these people said that that's why we need to go in there. And, Saddam Hussein was a horrible, horrible person. He wasn't a good person by any means. But to go under those pretenses, I think a lot of us would agree that more people died in this war than they would have had they just let this guy continue doing what he's doing, because he wasn't a nuclear threat that in the end that we realized, he wasn't. And now to also send soldiers under this false pretense, as a soldier, I'd be really upset. I'm conditioned to think this way, to treat people a certain way, and to serve others and treat others poorly and all of these things. And now to come back and say, hey, like, what happened there? right? And as a human being, you come back now into this normal society after being deployed and seeing the atrocities of war, which sadly we continue to see to this day. I mean, we all want world peace, but there's a lot of things that kind of fund war. You know, so many countries, their economy is driven by how many aircraft carriers are built and weapons and ships and all of those things. And all those things are part of the stock market and part of our pensions, and everyone, you know, buys into it, right? It's like buying meat from a grocery store, but saying, "Hey, if you have to hunt for it, no, I don't want to kill animals." You know, it's one of those things, right? But now you come back and you're trying to assimilate into regular society. And as somebody that, you know, I backpacked India and Sri Lanka a long time ago, and seeing poverty there, this is something completely different from war, but seeing how poor people are there, and then coming back here, I'm thinking, wow, like I was just on another planet almost. So for you to see war and come back and have the effects of it, can you talk about your journey with PTSD and the impact of the war and what you went through?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking me that, actually. There's one thing that I talk about. By the way, people that are pro-war probably never been to war. That's what I think,
Absolutely.
in my opinion. Because
Absolutely.
if you actually pay attention to what happens in war, you're not going to be pro it. Because the amount of people that die, innocent people, it's always the innocent people that die. You know? It's heartbreaking. I mean, it's heartbreaking. And about, you know, when I got out of the service, the thing with the military, you know, I was in the United States Army, so I can only speak about the United States Army. We had to go through all this process. I mean, in order for us to deploy to Iraq, through all this training, it was an insane amount of training. I mean, they teach you this and that and all these things, right? But after you got back, I mean, you go through our processing, they ask a couple of questions and they let you go. And it's like, this is what we deal with. Like, you have all these soldiers that are coming back traumatized. I mean, if you've been in a war, man, you've seen some stuff. Like, I don't care what job you have. Some people are special forces, blah, 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 nurses, supply, you know, all these people. You've seen something. You're in an environment, and a stressful environment. So that is going, and unless you do something about the trauma, it's gonna show up in different areas in your life. When I got out of the service, it took them like a day to out-process me, and that was it. Like, nobody cared. And then you go to the VA, and they give you zombie pills. They give you pills for you to numb and act like a zombie so you can do anything in life. It's like, sorry, I just get very passionate about this because it's so...
Don't apologize.
It's so, I mean, heartbreaking. And it didn't happen to me. It happens to all the soldiers, like everybody. I've been in rooms with people no legs, you know, soldiers or completely traumatized by the war, and they can't even be in a place with people. Like when I got back from the service, right? It was when I went on R&R, which is is my break. When you're at war, you take 2 weeks out, 2 weeks of break, so you can go anywhere in the world. And I came to visit my family, and we went to the mall. I couldn't be in the mall. And I still to this day, I'm like, too many people. I'm like, wow, this is a lot for me. I don't know where that comes from, but I picked that up in war. I can tell you that much. I couldn't be around so many people. I couldn't like navigate through life. I was always angry. I would have panic attacks. I couldn't watch certain things on TV because I would have a panic attack. And I remember when I got out of the service, I went to college in New York. And I was in a chemistry class, and something like blew up. I don't know what it was. And I got so scared, I took cover under the table. I mean, everybody was like, well, what's wrong with her? Right? And that happened because of the experience that I just had, and nobody cares. Like, nobody cares. Like, you even have different treatments. You have new groundbreaking treatments right now to deal with PTSD, to deal with the soldiers, and the FDA does not want to approve it. The VA doesn't want to, they do research. I mean, there's so much research about this new groundbreaking, you know, psychedelics for they're dealing for trauma, for soldiers, and they don't want to approve it. They want to keep giving you those pills so you can be a zombie. Nobody cares. So it's like, this is what we're dealing with, but hold on, we want to go to war. We will send you to war. And they're the first ones to send other people's children to go to war, and yet we come back and we don't get anything. So I think I went a little bit on a rant, but I had to rearrange my life so I wouldn't get I would be terrified. I would be in the subway and certain smells would take me back. And then I would like try to ground myself, try to breathe, be like, it's okay, you're safe. I couldn't hear certain sounds because I would get like triggered. I would just get triggered. You're in an environment for 12 months, and
it's a closed environment, right? That's, I would say, my guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's two types of people in that environment. One type is that military framework. Everyone's in uniform, everyone's vetted, and you're from, the United States. There's an element of trust there. Then you have the local nationals, some of which are assets, and some of those assets are trustworthy and some of those assets are not, right? And I think the panic comes from so many stories I've heard where, an asset will show up and they'll take their robe off and they, are strapped with explosive and they clock off, right? And then the next thing you know, all of a sudden, this controlled environment is not in control anymore. This is your only safe zone, right? And so to come back into society, quote unquote, normal society, and to only have 1 day of discharge, that's ridiculous. And to give you those zombie pills, the antidepressants or whatever they were, the blockers, is to create a dependency so that they can continue to give those things, right? And I don't know, I don't know what kind of arrangements there are with pharma and things like that. And it seems like the new administration in the United States is taking a different approach with Robert Kennedy Jr., in terms of how alternative medicines will be addressed. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not here on the show to make that opinion. It just looks like they're taking a different approach, which a lot of people welcome. And I also find it pretty crazy that, again, a law that, or a war that was unlawfully justified, in order for a vet to use psychedelics to treat their PTSD, they have to break the law and go somewhere else and do it. You know what I mean? Again, I use the word reconcile a lot, but that's also, as a vet, I would think that would make people upset as well, right?
So bad. Because you have to go to Mexico, to Peru, to Costa Rica to get treatment that is very expensive. But you have great
How much
organizations.
does it cost?
I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of love for Heroic Hearts Project, which is the organization. They're actually supporting my new project right now. And they send veterans to Peru to do Mother Ayahuasca with the Shipibo tribe. But that because they pay for your plane ticket, they pay for your hotel, they pay for everything. And if you want to donate, you can donate. But you don't truly have to. And I think it's about like $7,000 per soldier. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Yeah.
So how did you get introduced to Heroic Hearts and seeing that psychedelics could be a way to treat this? And again, I don't know a lot about psychedelics, but the thing I keep hearing about it, I mean, I hear about the positive benefits for PTSD, but on the flip side, I also hear that if somebody has a history of psychosis in their family, it could have a very negative impact, like schizophrenia, dementia, like those things. And people need to be aware that those things could actually harm them if they do those things, but some people may not be aware, right? So I just wanted to preface with that. But for psychedelics and your journey and this organization called Heroic Hearts, which looks at alternative medicine to help vets, can you talk about how you got there and how you were introduced to it?
Yeah. So one thing about, I just want to piggyback on what you said. So whenever you do psychedelics, you have to know where to do them, correct? And also you have to go through a screening process. If you have schizophrenia, psychosis, you can't do them. So it's not for everyone, right? So you have to you have to qualify. So there's a whole screening process in which, doctors speak to doctors and nurses, and then you qualify for them. That's one thing about it. So I got introduced to psychedelics by a friend of mine. He's actually one of my mentors. And he wrote this play in New York, and he found this New York Times article about women veterans doing psychedelics. And back then I was about to write my first big film, feature film. I was doing shorts, and I found it interesting, and something called me into it. So I looked them up, and I had already watched this documentary by John Huston. It was during World War One, I believe. World War One or World War Two, I forget. And they were treating in this hospital in Long Island with a truth serum, right, which is a similar effect of psychedelics, right? And they were healing all these soldiers from what it was called back then shell shock, right? So that was kind of my first introduction. And then he tagged me on this article, and then I looked it up, and then I went to Mexico to get a treatment, an Ibogaine treatment, which was my first introduction to plant medicine. That one I had to pay for, right, on my own. And I did Ibogaine, which is a root that comes from Gabon in Africa. It's a very intense psychedelic. I mean, you're in it for like 12 to 14 hours. There were doctors, nurses.
Wow.
I was plugged into an IV, they had to do EKGs, blood work, a lot of stuff. And that was the first introduction that I had to psychedelics, right? And then one of the persons there, because it was a group of veterans, she told me about this organization called Heroic Hearts Project. And I looked them up, and I was still struggling after doing Ibogaine, actually. I was still struggling and, numbing myself, I was drinking alcohol and, smoking cannabis and all these things. And I was numbing myself. I was so angry and much pain. I started to become like suicidal at one point. So I applied. So I was working with someone, and then she recommended me as well to Heroic Hearts Project, and I applied, and then I got in. And I got into Heroic Hearts Project and the application, and then they chose me, and then they sent me to Peru. It was about a year ago, in July of 2023, that I went to the Amazon in Peru. So I was connected to Heroic Hearts Project, and then they sent me because I had no money back then, and they donated all this money for us to go to Peru and to do ayahuasca with the Shipibo tribe, which is a tribe in the Amazon, Peruvian Amazon, that the medicine could be traced the longest. And I don't know, after that, it saved my life. And I love Heroic Hearts Project because they truly care about veterans. There's so many organizations out there, but, with Heroics, they love, and they're very supportive of other people's project or trying to legalize the psychedelics for veterans, because they understand the amount of research, and they partner with different organizations to do research and to try to keep the movement forward. And the FDA just turned down, they did some MDMA trials, and the FDA just turned it down, right? It was about the legalization. I forget what it was. It was recently that happened. So Heroic Hearts is a great organization. And I mean, and as shortly after that, I went into sobriety, and my life changed completely. So it was really thankful to them, big time. Yeah.
So no drinking, no cannabis.
No. So right after
that's
that,
amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, right
that's,
after
that's,
that.
that's an achievement.
It's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy. One day at a time, for sure. Sometimes
Yep.
10 minutes at a time. But it was after Heroic Hearts Project, and also I do psychotherapy. I work with my therapist. She's an actual psychotherapist as well. So we're able to integrate some of the things that I've seen during my psychedelic trips into my life, into triggers of people, and then we're able to connect things and be able to heal, because you have to go through these things all over again in order for you to heal them. And that's what psychedelic does. It brings down that ego, that wall, so you can go through it again, and then you'll be able to heal. But you have to work with a therapist afterward. Like, integration is a very important part of the psychedelic treatment. It goes together. You have to do both. Yeah.
Is there anything that you would be able to share that you saw that was life-changing when you went on this journey? Like, what made you come up with, Paula, the awakening, and Paula 2.0, like was there anything kind of seismic that you remember that made you transform?
Oh my God. Uh, Whoa. So ayahuasca and I begin very different. They're different, right? It's more like Mother Eye
How?
is more of a feminine energy. I begin it feels very male energy.
Interesting.
And when I did ibogaine, it's a very visual plant. So it's like you're watching, right? And I saw a lot of my ancestors that came to visit me. And then I saw one of the greatest teachers that has ever walked this earth. He came to see me as well. And he looked at me and he was about my sobriety. So he was trying to tell me that I needed to walk into sobriety in order to see the light, in order to achieve my highest potential. So that was so shortly after I began, I knew that I needed to go into sobriety, but I couldn't do it. Like it was so difficult for me. I needed more. Sometimes you need more than one treatment. Some people love to do it all the time. That's not the way this is supposed to go. I don't think so. But there are a couple of them, so you can like break the shell apart. So it was when I saw this spirit, this person it was on earth a long, 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 long time ago. And then he gave me that look and he told me, but he didn't say it with his words, but it's a different communication. And that's when I knew I needed to be sober. Yeah. So that's an image I mean, a lot of images are with me all the time. But that was an image that truly, I mean, it changed my life. I was like, what's happening? What is this? But yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it did. Some people also share other types of experiences. So you mentioned some of your ancestors, coming to see you. Was there anything else so you talked about the ibogaine in the Mother Ayahuasca journey. How was that different and what did you see there?
Yeah, well, Mother Aya was a bit different because I am from South America. So that is the medicine of my ancestors. And when I went to do ayahuasca at the Amazon, a couple of years back, so I'm just going to tell you the story. A couple of years back, maybe like 5-7 years ago, I went to Machu Picchu, which is the Holy Land, right? Machu Picchu is a holy land. And I was very ignorant back then. And I used to love to collect rocks wherever I went, every time that I hiked. So I took a rock. I was very innocent. I mean, I guess. And I took a rock from the Holy Land, just a little rock from the ground. And I got very sick, very, very, very sick. And I almost died that night. And all of a sudden, I started developing the stomach issue, right? And no doctors could tell me what was truly going on with me. I would eat certain things, and I would get very, very sick, very ill. But nobody could tell me really what was going on. And when I did ibogaine, one of the spirits like circled my stomach, and I was like, "Oh my God, I got cancer." So, but then I spoke to the doctor there, and he said that I had IBS. So I was like, okay. So I had IBS, and I took some medicine. I changed my diet, and everything was fine. And then it got worse. And then I went to the Amazon, and what I did was a very disrespectful thing. You should never take anything from a holy land. So I was able to speak to the maestros, and in a ceremony, they healed my stomach. So that was my journey when I did ayahuasca and ibogaine was kind of different. When you deal with a lot of ancestral things for me, right? Connected with my ancestors, healing my stomach. They healed my stomach. It took them 2 days, and it felt like I actually had surgery. Like I couldn't get up. They had to help me up. And after I was done, I promised them that I was going to return to rock, which I did back in July. I did the Inca Trail, and they healed my stomach. So it was very different. It was very different, but I felt it was very ancestral, like the blessings of my ancestors, the connection with the Shipibo tribe. it was very different for me to do Mother Ayahuasca and to do Ibogaine. So they were very different for me. Yeah.
Is it something now, how long ago was that? And is it something that you continually do maybe a few times a year? What does that look like for somebody that wants to heal themselves from PTSD and go through this treatment?
So I haven't done ayahuasca. I did last time I did a Mother Ayahuasca it was in July of 2023, and December of 2022 is when I did Ibogaine. I haven't done it since. I don't know what the future holds. I am decoding everything that I saw, and once the channel is open, then you're able to dig in, right? You're able to see these things. So I work with a therapist, like I said, and we work together on my trauma and on my triggers, and things come up. So I don't have the need right now to do it again. I know people that do it all the time. I don't agree with that, but everybody has their own choice. Everybody do whatever they need to do to, I don't know, make it through the day. But I haven't done it in a while. It's been like a year and a half, and I'm not sure if I ever would do it again, or I don't know. To me, that medicine calls you, especially when it comes to ayahuasca. It's a calling that it just calls you. So, but if you are a veteran struggling from PTSD, and if you're willing, because you are going to open yourself up and you are going to see some trauma, right? We have a universe within us. So whatever is going on inside of you is going to come out. So there's a lot of courage that comes with it. But if you are struggling, you should give it a try. And sometimes it takes 2 to 3 times. When I went to the Amazon, I did 3 ayahuasca ceremonies. So I did Ibogaine only once, and I did 5-MeO DMT twice when I was in Mexico. But that's about it. I haven't touched anything since.
And as you mentioned, I think in order to be successful with this treatment, the therapy and the integration or the reintegration, making sense of what you saw, that is an important component of it, right? It's not like you just do this and you figure it out on your own afterwards. For people that this has been successful for, that's a very important part of the treatment as well. So I think it's worth mentioning. I want to now switch gears and talk about what I think is also a very exciting journey for you, your journey as a filmmaker. I saw the short film you made, Shell Shocked. I thought it was done really well. I like the editing. I like the timing of certain things, and the impact of that. How did you get into filmmaking? I mean, it's not an easy thing to get into. And in LA, I mean, there's like millions of people that want to do it, I'm sure. How did you get into it?
Well, I've always wanted to create. I always wanted to write. So my background is in acting. I went to acting school and I learned all that stuff. But then I always wanted to create. And then back in the day, I made this little short with somebody, but I wasn't directing it. But actually, everybody thought that I was a director in the picture, but I wasn't. So shortly after that, I started writing, and it was actually my therapist, the one that I'm with today. She's been my therapist for like 10 years, for a really long time. And I wrote this thing and I read it to her, and she was like, it sounds like a movie. Because I was like, oh, maybe this could be a play. And she was like, no, this sounds like a film. So I was like, oh. And that's how kind of my journey went. And I was like, well, let me shoot this. And my first films were not as great, right? Not that what I do is great, but there's a process, right? So I started making films, and it wasn't until I did this other short called Señorita, it was a boxing short, that I realized, I was like, oh no, this is what I want to do. And I didn't go to film school. So I'm a self-taught director, filmmaker. And I found someone that introduced me to the great filmmakers like Truffaut, Kubrick, Hitchcock, all these great filmmakers. And he was like explaining things to me, and I just like loved it so much. And I started learning reading books, watching films, and started making films. And and one thing led to another, and I don't know, like I love directing. It's my everything in a way. And I moved to LA. Yeah, there's a lot of people that do films. That's cool, but you know, my competition is with myself. So I want to get better at whatever I do. And some people love shell shock, but I see all the mistakes. There's so many mistakes. I'm like, oh, right, because I want to get better and I want to improve. And there's a lot of competition, but I'm competing with myself. So yeah, but I love it. I oh my God, I love making movies. Yeah.
What would you say when I see people that make movies, or even that, are photographers, they have a certain style, a certain angle of how they tell a story. What would you say yours is?
It's still under development. Um,
What would you say it's now?
I'm a pretty young filmmaker still. I'm making my first big film, my first feature film, soon, which I'm shooting the proof of concept in New York, in February. It's called Let There Be Light, which is a story about psychedelic treatment for veterans who suffer from PTSD. But it's a narrative film, so it's a female's journey into plant medicine. Um, I don't know if I have a specific style. I don't think I have it. I have developed it just yet. I think it's a process and it takes time. So I don't have a specific style. I don't think, but I do love lighting. Oh my God, I love lighting. I love,
Mm-hmm.
and my cinematographer, he actually shot Shell Shock. He's gonna be the DP in this project, and him and I understand each other very well. His background, he has a big background in lighting, so the way he lights is so beautiful, and I love painting a picture. Um, and I love actors because I understand what they're going through. Because I'm also an actor. I don't do it all
Mm-hmm.
the time because I'd rather make films. But I understand their lingo, their language, and I can look at an actor and I can be like, that's a good actor. Or I can look at somebody and be like, okay, you'll be good for this. So I think I have a good collaboration when it comes to actors, and I just love painting a picture. So for now, I think that would be my style, but it's, who knows? I don't know. In a couple of years, you can ask me the same question.
I used to do a lot of photography, and I'm embarrassed to say I haven't picked up my camera in a long time. But one of the things for me is I like low light photography, and the film, Shell Shocked, your film, Shell Shocked, a lot of it was in low light. So I like that. I often would tell people I use light to paint with shadows, and that's how I would do low light photography, and I like that. I think there's something mysterious and very haunting. And as a viewer or the audience, you have to pay a bit more attention almost in the dark than you would in the light, right? Because when things are bright, it just shows more of a story. But when things are dark, everything in focus and everything in the screen needs to have a bit more thought, because it will either tell the story or detract from the story, right? So that's what I took from it when I was watching it. I paid a lot of attention to that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents anyway.
No,
um,
lighting is beautiful. I mean, think of The Godfather, right? It's so dark, so beautiful. So yeah, there's so many things about it, right? So
yeah,
just
yeah,
lighting and camera movement tells a story as well. So you're telling the audience where to look, pretty much. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So the new project that you're working on, the one that you're going to do the pilot, the proof of concept in February, can you talk a bit more about the character? Because I believe the character has a lot to do with your journey in the military, in the service, and sharing your story, because it is very dear to your heart. Without
Yeah,
giving away
yeah.
the ending, we don't want to ruin it for everyone.
Never. You gotta watch the film. Yeah. So her name is Alexandra Alvarez. She's a Hispanic from New York City. So the thing with Alex is that she has things of me, and yes, she's not me, right? She has things that are drawn from what I went through. So she's very traumatized by what happened, and she comes from a long long, you know, her family is all highly decorated cops. Her aunt is a detective. So she was supposed to follow into their footsteps. But after the war, after the military, she was like, I'm not doing any of this. So she works at a grocery store as a manager in New York. And she goes through life being just angry, and she's constantly haunted by this red presence that at the end of the day, at the end of the film, towards the end, we get to find out who it is. So every time she gets triggered, that presence will come in. And it's her demon, right? And that is traced to one of the demons that I had when I was in the service, right? That like I told you, when I was in training of that kid that passed away in front of his family, and we had the family members screaming for his life. I'm never going to forget that. And it was a ghost that was constantly hunted. And Alex gets, she gets triggered by these things, and she gets a panic attack and anger and so many things that she has to deal with. And at the beginning of the film, she gets mandated therapy. And then there she goes to therapy. And then because the point with veterans that suffer from PTSD, regular therapy doesn't work. It's very hard, right? Maybe, I don't know. But it's very difficult because you're so blocked. You don't want to go there. I have friends that I went to the Amazon with. Actually, my brother that gave me this gift. He saw his best friend burn in front of him when he was, I think he went to Afghanistan or Iraq. I forget which one. So who wants to think about that? Who relive all of that, right? So she gets mandated therapy, and the first therapist doesn't work. And then she gets another one, is this woman that understands that she needs more. So it is their journey, and is gaining Alex's trust, and really realizing that she needs something else, and she needs plant medicine. But, Alex was raised by this woman, her aunt, that is a narcotics detective. So we get to see the other side, right? Because when people think of plant medicine, they think of drugs, right? It's a Schedule I drug, and it's bad, and people just want to get high, and this hippie stuff, blah, 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 blah. It isn't, right? Trust me, nobody wants to do ayahuasca. It is painful. It can be very painful. Nobody's getting high. So it is that, but it's also that view of what it is, how people feel about plant medicine. What is the society thinks about this, or this people being scared, right? And we also get to see the other side of Alex and the therapist that gives you the research of what's going on and how it's helping veterans. So, and then, she has a love interest and all that good stuff. So it's a lot of fun. It's a good film, actually. We're working on the new draft, for the feature. So my co-writer and I. So yeah, I love this film. I love the characters. It's very New York, and there's a lot of love in this film. There's a lot of love from the characters amongst each other, amongst the aunt that, she's a narcotics detective. That's all she knows. And her niece is about to go do plant medicine in Mexico. She's like, what? In Mexico? Right? So it gives a lot of points of views, but at the end of the day, you have to make your own choice. It is your life. We take charge of our lives and what we have to go through. So, yeah. And then we get to see what happened to her. And then, yeah. And then other stuff.
I wanted to ask you, in terms of your life and your journey, coming to America from Colombia as a child or a teenager, going to high school, and then joining the military and seeing the things that you saw and coming to where you are today. You saw a lot of really, really harsh realities of war. You saw the worst of humanity and went through a lot of trauma to do it, and brought with you a lot of trauma back, and didn't find the resources right away to help you. Is there anything you would have changed in your last, say, 20 years of life, 15 years of life? Is there anything you would have said, hey, you know what? Maybe I wouldn't have done that one thing. Maybe I wouldn't have gone to Iraq. Maybe I should have done something else.
I used to think about that. No, I wouldn't change anything. I think everything that I've been through prepared me for where I am today. And those are healing Those are lessons that I needed to go through, you know. Um, and because I was in the military, I get certain benefits now that I'm able to do what I do freely, more freely, right? And being in the military prepared me to be a director, 100%. There's no doubt about that. That was a training that I needed. Didn't go to film school, but I went to the Army, and I was taught leadership, good and bad. And I learned, I didn't go to film school either. I'm self-taught. I love being self-taught. One of my artistic heroes, he's self-taught. So I wouldn't change anything. I think it gave me the experience to be able to tell and help others. Because the whole reason why we're making Let There Be Light, which is the name of the film, is to tell others they're not alone, that we have help, that there's help out there, that they don't have to keep taking those zombie pills. That they're able to heal through plant medicine if they qualify for it and if they're willing to do the work, because you have to do the work. It's not a magic pill. So, no, I wouldn't change anything. I know it sounds like traumatic, but nah. Even growing up in Colombia and seeing poverty, and my mother was not very present, and my father left when I was 2, and coming to America and learning a language. I didn't speak English until I was 16 years old. I wouldn't change it. I always wonder why I was not born in the U.S., why I was born in Colombia. Plant medicine, because my roots are there. My ancestors, the Incas, the indigenous, that's my people. That's why I was born there. So, no, I wouldn't change anything because it makes me who I am today.
And we share something in that. The reason I do this podcast is to share people's stories that have gone through change and felt very alone. I've gone through many changes. I'm going through one now, just in terms of career transition. And, there are times where you do feel alone, and you have to remind yourself that you have good people around you. You have supportive family and friends, and that we are not alone. We all go through hardship. We all go through different journeys, and that really sharpens us with resolve, resilience. That's a word I'm really paying a lot of attention to these days, is resilience. There's days where, you just feel like things just can only go up, right? And you got to keep believing in yourself. You got to just put one foot in front of the other and keep going. So I'm glad you're sharing this journey. I'm glad we connected. I think you're doing amazing things. Even from our initial call, I said, this is someone special here. And I'm really glad that we got a chance to connect. And I can't wait to see the movie, but I'm looking forward to following your journey as a filmmaker. So thank you for joining me today. It was awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was great, man. I felt it in your message. You were the real deal. So I'm excited to see you grow in this podcast too, and see you flourish, my friend.
Paula's story is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of seeking help when the world feels like too much to bear. If you or someone you know is struggling with PTSD or trauma, organizations like Heroic Hearts are doing incredible work to support veterans in finding their way forward. And if Paula's story resonated with you, keep an eye out for her feature film, Let There Be Light, which promises to be a raw and honest portrayal of the veteran experience. Links to Paula's work and fundraising for her feature film project will be in the description of this episode. Just one more thing. Before we go, there was something that Paula shared with me during our post-recording debrief. She revealed who the greatest teacher was that appeared to her during her psychedelic journey. I have to admit, it caught me off guard, and I was surprised to hear who it was. If you think you know, send me your guess by DM on Instagram at mylifeafter.ca. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And Paula, thank you for your service. I'm Steve Joseph, and we'll see you next time. This episode was brought to you by Heal3, a curated wellness program for your employees' well-being.